Listen carefully. Some compliments don't flatter a woman's ego. They rewire how safe, seen, and chosen she feels around you. I'm speaking to you as a psychologist, but also as someone who has listened to thousands of women describe the exact moment a man's words changed how they felt about him. And here's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. It's not the loud, clever, or sexy compliments that stay with her. It's the ones that land quietly, almost unnoticed, but hit something deeper than attraction. Older men, whether you're 35, 45, or 65, often underestimate the power you already carry. You think youth owns desire. It doesn't. Presence does. And presence is communicated through language that shows emotional maturity, not performance. The first compliment that hits different is when you acknowledge her state, not her surface. When you say something like, "You seem calmer when you talk about what matters to you," you're not judging her looks or trying to impress her. You're showing that you observe her inner world. Women are rarely seen at that level. That single sentence tells her you're paying attention without trying to take anything from her. The second compliment is about consistency, not excitement. When you tell her, "You're someone who shows up the same way, even when things aren't perfect," you're speaking directly to a woman's need for emotional reliability. This lands especially hard because many women associate men with unpredictability. You quietly separate yourself from that category. Here's where psychology matters. Compliments from older men feel different because they're expected to come with stability. But when that stability is paired with emotional attunement, it creates a sense of safety that younger men often can't replicate, no matter how charming they are. The third compliment that changes everything is when you respect her boundaries out loud. Saying, "I appreciate how you know what you want and don't apologize for it," tells her you're not threatened by her autonomy. That's rare. Most men try to soften or reshape a woman's boundaries to suit themselves. When you honor them, her nervous system relaxes. Attraction often follows relaxation, not pressure. Another deeply impactful compliment is acknowledging her growth. When you say, "You're not the same woman you were a few years ago," in a good way, you validate her evolution. Women carry silent pride about who they've survived becoming. When an older man recognizes that journey, it feels earned, not flirtatious. It feels real. Now listen closely, because this is where men get it wrong. These compliments only work when they're grounded in truth. Women can sense when words are used as tools instead of expressions. As a psychologist, I can tell you that false compliments activate skepticism, not desire. But sincere observation activates trust. There's also something powerful about complimenting her impact instead of her appearance. Saying, "People seem more open when you're in the room," shifts the focus from how she looks to how she affects the world. That's a compliment that stays with her long after the conversation ends. Older men often carry life experience they don't know how to translate into words. When you speak from that experience without trying to dominate or teach, your compliments feel grounded. They feel earned, and that's why they hit differently. One more truth most men never hear. Women remember how a compliment made them feel about themselves, not how it made them feel about you. When your words help her feel capable, steady, and respected, you become associated with those feelings. That's not manipulation. That's emotional intelligence. If you've ever felt invisible in modern dating, understand this. You don't need louder compliments. You need truer ones. And when they come from a man who knows himself, they don't sound like lines. They sound like recognition. And recognition is rare. There's a reason these compliments land harder when they come from older men, and it has nothing to do with age itself. It's about weight. Words carry weight when the man speaking them isn't desperate for approval. Women feel that instantly, often before they consciously understand it. One of the most powerful compliments you can give is this: "You don't rush your emotions, and that tells me you've learned from life." This doesn't praise her for being agreeable or easy. It respects her emotional pacing. Many women are pressured to feel faster, love quicker, forgive sooner. When you acknowledge her timing without trying to speed it up, you become a safe place instead of another demand. Another compliment that hits deep is when you validate her judgment. Saying, "You think things through before you trust people. That's not a flaw," directly counteracts years of messaging telling women they're too guarded or too cautious. From a psychological standpoint, this reduces internal conflict. She no longer has to choose between being careful and being desirable. You've just told her she can be both. Older men also have a unique advantage when it comes to complimenting competence. When you say, "You handle pressure better than most people I know," it doesn't sound like hype. It sounds like comparison backed by experience. Women are often praised for endurance, but rarely for capability. That distinction matters more than you think. Here's one that almost always lands in silence, the good kind. "You don't perform for attention, you're comfortable being real." This compliment works because it removes her from competition. It tells her she doesn't need to earn space with you. Psychologically, that lowers defensiveness and increases openness. People open up where they don't feel measured. Another deeply resonant compliment is acknowledging emotional labor. When you say, "I notice how much you carry for other people," you're naming something invisible. Women do a lot of emotional work that goes unrecognized. When an older man notices it without trying to benefit from it, it feels respectful instead of transactional. Now, let's talk about restraint, because restraint is attractive when it's intentional. Saying, "I like that you don't need to be the loudest to be heard," signals that you value substance over noise. That lands differently coming from a man who has seen trends come and go. Your approval isn't based on novelty, it's based on depth. Here's a compliment many men avoid because they misunderstand it. "You challenge people without trying to control them." This tells her you respect her spine. Many women fear that being strong will make them unlovable. When you affirm her strength without trying to soften it, you create a powerful emotional bond rooted in mutual respect. There's also something grounding about complimenting how a woman handles herself rather than how she makes you feel. Saying, "You move through the world with intention," centers her agency. It doesn't place you at the center of the story. And paradoxically, that often pulls her closer. From a psychological lens, these compliments work because they align with identity, not validation. They don't tell her she's wanted, they tell her she's understood. And understanding creates attraction that doesn't fade when attention shifts. Older men who struggle in dating often believe they're competing with younger men on energy or looks. That's the wrong competition. You're competing on emotional clarity. When your compliments come from observation instead of hunger, they feel rare, and rare things are valued. One more truth, women don't trust intensity without consistency. A compliment that's calm, measured, and specific signals emotional regulation. That matters more than passion in the long run. It tells her you won't disappear when emotions get complicated. If you want your words to land, slow down. Let silence do some of the work. A compliment delivered without urgency feels chosen, not blurted out. And when a woman feels chosen without pressure, her guard doesn't rise. It softens. These are not tricks. They're reflections. And reflections, when accurate, change how a person sees themselves. There's a subtle shift that happens when a woman hears these compliments from an older man. She doesn't just hear the words, she weighs the source. Experience gives your voice gravity, but only if you don't misuse it. The moment a compliment sounds like leverage, its power disappears. One of the deepest compliments you can give is this: "You don't confuse intensity with intimacy." Psychologically, this is huge. Many women have been pulled into fast emotional situations that burned out just as quickly. When you recognize her discernment, you're telling her she's not broken for moving carefully. You're aligning with her self-respect instead of trying to bypass it. Another compliment that lands with surprising force is acknowledging her emotional boundaries. Saying, "You know when to step back, and that tells me you trust yourself," affirms her internal compass. Women are often told they overthink or feel too much. This reframes her awareness as wisdom. That's not flattering. It's stabilizing. Older men often underestimate how attractive it is to compliment restraint. When you say, "You don't need chaos to feel alive," you separate her from drama without shaming her past. It communicates that you see who she is now, not who she used to be. That kind of recognition feels clean. It feels earned. Here's a compliment that changes how she sees you almost instantly. You listen to yourself before you listen to the room. This tells her you respect her independence of thought. Many women adapt to social expectations to survive. When you value her internal authority, you create a space where she doesn't have to perform. There's also power in complimenting how a woman recovers, saying, "You don't let setbacks define you," recognizes resilience without romanticizing pain. From a psychological perspective, this validates strength without reinforcing trauma identity. Women want to be seen as capable, not just enduring. Another deeply impactful compliment is when you notice emotional honesty. "You're direct without being cruel," tells her she can speak freely around you. That safety is rare. Many women are punished socially for being clear. When an older man appreciates clarity, it lowers her fear of being misunderstood. Now let's talk about one compliment that almost always creates a pause. You don't need constant reassurance to know your worth. This isn't praise, it's recognition of self-trust. And when it comes from a man who isn't trying to inflate her ego, it feels grounding rather than manipulative. From years of listening to women, I can tell you this. They remember the man who made them feel steady, not excited, not dizzy, steady. Compliments that point to steadiness activate a sense of future safety. And safety is the foundation of lasting attraction. Older men who speak this way aren't chasing youth, they're honoring maturity, hers and their own. That alignment creates a dynamic that feels equal, not transactional. She doesn't feel evaluated, she feels met. There's also something disarming about a compliment that isn't followed by expectation. Saying, "I admire how you handle responsibility," and then letting it sit, shows emotional discipline. No fishing, no escalation, just respect. That restraint signals confidence far louder than flirting ever could. Psychologically, when a woman doesn't feel rushed to respond, her curiosity grows. Space invites reflection, and reflection often leads to emotional investment. One more truth that matters. Compliments that focus on who she is when no one's watching create intimacy without invasion. When you say, "You seem most yourself when you're not trying to impress anyone," you're seeing behind the mask, without demanding access. That's the line older men walk best when they're grounded. You don't push, you notice, and noticing when done well feels like care. If you've ever wondered why some men are remembered long after they leave a woman's life, it's because they spoke to her identity, not her insecurity. And identity, once affirmed, doesn't forget who affirmed it. By now, you may be realizing something uncomfortable. These compliments aren't about saying the right thing. They're about being the kind of man whose words carry truth. Women don't fall for language. They respond to alignment between what's said and who's standing in front of them. The final compliments that hit hardest are the ones that don't ask for anything back. When you say, "You've built a life that reflects your values," you're not inserting yourself into her story. You're honoring it. That tells her you're not there to take over. You're capable of standing beside her. Another powerful one is this: you don't shrink to keep people comfortable. Psychologically, this validates self-respect. Many women have learned to make themselves smaller to maintain peace. When an older man recognizes her fullness without being threatened, it creates deep respect. Respect is often mistaken for distance, but it's actually the soil where trust grows. One of the most grounding compliments you can give is acknowledging her self-awareness. Saying, "You know your limits and you don't apologize for them," affirms emotional maturity. This lands differently because it removes shame from boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're structure, and structure creates safety. There's also something quietly intimate about saying, "You don't need to be rescued." This isn't dismissal, it's acknowledgement of strength. From a psychological standpoint, this tells her you're not trying to play savior. Relationships without saviors tend to be healthier, more balanced, and more sustainable. Another compliment that leaves a lasting imprint is noticing how she treats others when there's nothing to gain. "You're kind even when no one's watching," speaks directly to character. That kind of recognition makes a woman feel deeply seen because it's about her private self, not her public image. Older men who understand this don't rush to define the connection. They let meaning unfold. When you say you move through life with quiet confidence, you're not demanding attention. You're acknowledging presence. Presence is what makes people feel real around you. One of the final compliments that changes how she remembers you is this: you don't confuse being alone with being lonely. This respects her independence. Many women fear that choosing solitude will make them undesirable. When you affirm her wholeness, you become associated with freedom, not pressure. Here's the truth few men ever hear. The most attractive compliments don't elevate you, they stabilize her. And a woman who feels stable around you will associate you with peace. Peace is addictive in a world full of noise. From a psychological perspective, these compliments work because they reinforce identity without hijacking it. You're not defining her, you're recognizing her. Recognition builds trust. Trust builds attraction. Attraction built on trust doesn't fade easily. Now ask yourself this honestly. When you compliment a woman, are you trying to impress her, or are you responding to who she actually is? Drop your answer in the comments. I read them carefully. If this video made you see your words differently, like the video so it reaches the men who need to hear it. Subscribe for deeper insights into attraction, psychology, and self-mastery. And share this with a friend who's still using compliments to chase attention, when what he really needs is presence.